Welcome to The Hindu editorial discussion. Today's focus is going to be China India relations, which is going to be part of international relation as well as national security, GS paper 2 and GS paper 3 respectively. My name is Ryan Pinto and I'm going to discuss two editorials which had come in January 7th and January 9th newspaper on India and China relation. When we talk about India and China relations, we know we are neighbors. We got independence, or we can say we became republic around the same time. India 1947, 15th of August, and we got our constitution on 26th of January 1950. Whereas Republic of China formed on October 1st, 1949. On the screen, you have the two leaders that are currently on the helm. That is, we have Xi Jinping, who is the president of China, and we have our Prime Minister, Honorable Narendra Modi. Now, the first editorial talks about the Navy, the Indian Ocean, and you can also say the extended neighborhood of India, the Indo-Pacific region, India as well as the Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean. What is the geopolitical, or you can say international strategic maneuveration or maneuvers going around in this place? Boosting India with maritime domain awareness. So this is what we are going to focus on, the first editorial. This was on January 7th. Beyond monitoring Chinese activity in the Indian Ocean, India's initiatives could help generate intra-regional synergy. So when we talk about Indian Ocean and the countries in these areas, we should not only see the Chinese activity and that is why we are doing something over here. We should try to have intra-regional synergy. Intra-regional synergy means we should have cooperation with all the countries over here, rather than just seeing that India is present in Indian Ocean just to negate or just to counter China. That should not be the way we should go. The legendary military theorist Sun Tzu is once said to have observed that the critical element in battle was foreknowledge, a prior reading of the adversary and the theatre of battle. The master tactician asserted could decisively shift the balance of fortune of power or fortune of war. What did Sun Tzu said? Sun Tzu said we should be able to know your enemy. When we play chess, you must have seen, or you must have heard, or you must have even played chess. In that, you must have seen how the players think. They think what is the move they need to make on the basis of what might be the move which your enemy will be making. So foreknowledge, you should be able to read your enemy, and that can change the whole fortune in war. So this is what we should focus on when we are talking about India in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Nature of enemy at sea. In modern time arena, war is a more complex proposition than in the days of Sun Tzu, but foreknowledge is still critical. Today, it is very difficult to go at war. In the second editorial also, we will be seeing it's not easy to just declare war and start fighting between countries. We are in the age of nuclear weapons. It will destroy all of us. But foreknowledge is very, very important. Foreknowledge again means knowing your enemy before the enemy takes the steps. Today, the enemy at sea is often unrecognizable. It can be terrorist, a pirate, a criminal, or a sea robber. An invisible presence that lurks behind regular actors such as fishermen and port workers. So, what is the challenge in the sea? The enemy is unrecognizable. It can be anyone. It can be a terrorist, it can be a pirate, criminal. The problem is they act like they are fishermen or port workers and then they do their crime. Law enforcement agencies today need to be a lot vigilant, highly reliant on high grade sensors and communication networks that observe, track suspicious movements, sharing information in real time. Practitioners describes this state of enhanced consciousness as maritime domain awareness. So understand, in the sea it is difficult to recognize the enemy. Secondly, the law enforcement agencies need to be very vigilant. They need to have sensors, communication networks, good intelligence, sharing information, and all these things needs to be there. So you must have seen in the oceans, we have got aircraft carriers, we have submarines, we have coastal ships, we have all the equipments, the radars and sensors, etc. Navy is seeking to expand India's surveillance footprint by setting up radar stations. So what is the Indian Navy focusing on now is radar. In Maldives, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Sri Lanka have already integrated into the wider coastal radar chain network. Already, India has radars at Mauritius, Seychelles, Sri Lanka. So, if this is India, so you have Mauritius over here, Sri Lanka is over here, Seychelles is here, Madagascar is here. So, this is the Indian Ocean. This area is the Indian Ocean. So, you have to remember the Indian Ocean is a platform where India and China is trying to show their dominance, and we need to be ready to foreknowledge to understand what China is doing. So radars are needed. Maldives, Myanmar, Bangladesh, we are preparing now. Already Mauritius, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, we have got the radars. Indian Navy's efforts seem focused primarily on monitoring China's activity. In the Eastern Ocean region or Eastern Indian Ocean, particularly in the seas around Andaman and Nicobar Islands, since June 2020, when the Indian Army and the People's Liberation Army clashed in Galwan in northern Ladakh. Currently, what is India trying to do? India is just trying to monitor Chinese activity in especially near Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because China has got their radars and their bases in these areas. Indian maritime planners have been wary of the possibility of greater Chinese presence in the eastern littorals. So, the eastern part of India, so this is the ocean, Bay of Bengal, and you have the Andaman Nicobar. There is where our focus needs to be, and that is what the military is doing. And as you know, in Andaman Nicobar Islands, we have a integrated Eastern Command. Integrated Eastern Command means you have Army, Navy, and Air Force all together working in the Indian Ocean, that is Andaman Nicobar. In recent months, India's P-81 aircraft have scored the near seas for People's Liberation Army Navy submarines, and Indian naval ships have patrolled the Andaman Seas and eastern choke points to deter any maritime adventuring by Beijing. So, India is looking for any movements by China. India's P-81 aircraft. Same way, we have the other submarines and the aircraft carriers all in Eastern Ocean, Indian Ocean, to check what the Chinese are doing. But the other strategy can be having good relations with the neighborhood, cooperative synergies in the neighborhood. There are reports that in 7 Indian Ocean countries, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, and Seychelles, will soon post liaison officers at the Indian Navy's Information Fusion Center, Indian Ocean region in Gurugram. Gurgaon, earlier it was called Gurugram. These 7 countries will post a liaison officer. Liaison officer means we can have good relation with these countries by exchange of information through these officers, and it is going to be in the Information Fusion Center. So France already has an officer at the IFC, and 4 other Indo-Pacific navies, Australia, Japan, UK, and US, also have agreed to position officers at the center. So the big powers like France and UK and Japan, USA, they all have got Australia, they all have got their liaison officers. Now our neighbors are also coming forward for giving us the liaison, for keeping the liaison officers. New Delhi is also upping its engagement in the Western Indian Ocean by positioning liaison officer at the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center in Madagascar. So in the Western Indian Ocean also, so we have seen in the Eastern also there are issues, in the Western Indian Ocean also, like in the western of India we have Africa, we have Madagascar, Seychelles, Mauritius, Maldives. Here also we are trying to have good relationship with the neighbors by engaging a liaison officer in Madagascar. India has also posted an officer at the European Maritime Awareness in the Strait of Hormuz in Abu Dhabi to assist monitoring of maritime activity in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. So in the Gulf countries also we are posting our officers. So just remember, there are issues between India and China. We are trying to counter China by keeping an eye on them, but we also need to have good relationship with the neighborhood countries by keeping liaison officers and making it Indian Fusion Center strong. The French are very helpful and the French are very close to India. Delhi's moves in the western and the southwestern littorals have been facilitated by the French. We know Mauritius and the other islands are under the French, a key Indian Ocean power and a critical partner for India in the region. Having signed a logistics agreement with Delhi in 2019, Paris is keen for a stronger partnership in the maritime commons. So Paris or France is keen to have close relationship with India. From an operational perspective, however, the Indian Navy's priority remains South Asia, where the naval leadership remains focused on underwater domain awareness in the Eastern Indian Ocean. So French are having good relation with India, especially west and southwest, but our focus is on the eastern part because we are facing the danger with China, and that can be solved by having good relationship with the neighborhood countries, especially under the underwater. China watch. There is a concern among the maritime watchers. So, what is the concern? The concern is that China is continuously trying to dominate this area. So, the PLAN, that is People's Liberation Army Naval, may be poised to develop a generation of quieter submarines. So, they are very dangerous, but they are making quieter submarines that would be hard to detect in the near seas 3 years after the Chinese staged a breakthrough in submarine propulsion. So our radars will be a very great challenge for our radars to catch these submarines. The recent discovery of a Chinese unmanned underwater vehicle close to the southern Indian Ocean island suggests that China may already mapping the undersea terrain in the approaches to Indian Ocean region with a view to advanced submarine operations. So there was a unmanned underwater vehicle which was in Indonesia. So it means that China is already up to these plans. In a bid to enhance surveillance over sensitive sea spaces, the Indian Navy has inducted two Sea Guardian drones on lease from US. With 9 operational P-81 aircrafts, the Navy's coverage of Bay of Bengal littoral is already considerable. So China is having its power, trying to dominate or trying to uh, make quieter submarines and doing some mapping and trying to pose a danger in the eastern part of India, that is Indian Ocean, whereas we are trying to counter them by making some drones, especially two Sea Guardian drones we have made. So from on lease from not made, we have taken it from on lease from United States so that we can counter China. So what's the real test? There is a concern among the maritime watchers that PLAN, that is the Chinese Navy, may be poised to develop a generation of quieter submarines that we have seen. So the conclusion is while cooperative information sharing allows for a joint evaluation of threats, countries do not always share vital information timelessly. So we should be depending on the neighbors and having good relation. But the problem is the challenge is mostly the countries do not share vital information. To bring real change, India must ensure seamless information flow, generating operational synergy with partners, and aim to expand collaborative endeavors in shared spaces. So we should have more close relationship, seamless information flow, good partnership. that would be real test of the maritime domain awareness, game changing potential. So this will actually help us counter China. So we have seen in Navy or in the naval arena what is the situation between India and China, more focusing on the eastern area, that is near Andaman, Nicobar and Indonesia and all these places, and in the west also having good relationship with France and the other uh, countries or the islands. So the next we are focusing on India and China with relation to the Galwan Valley or Eastern Ladakh situation which happened recently. Again part of internal security and international relation. So on your screen we have India and China clashed together in the Galwan Valley in Eastern Ladakh region. China thought that India will go back, but good step taken by India by standing, you can say, eye to eye and fought the Chinese. Though the Chinese have taken some areas, India also has taken some strategic areas from the Chinese, and the Chinese thought India will go back and listen to their demands, but we haven't done it. So this is the map. You can see Ladakh in the pink, Jammu and Kashmir, Kargil, Ladakh, and Aksai Chin, which is a part of India but in the hands of China currently. And the border with the Aksai Chin and Ladakh, there is the issue which is faced between India and China. On the western side, we have northern areas, that is Gilgit Baltistan, and Azad Kashmir, that is the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Grading India's counter coercive strategy. So let's see. So we saw in the naval part what is happening. Let's see what is happening on the borders in Kashmir. It can only be fair to argue that the country has done well in countering Chinese moves in eastern Ladakh. The world was caught napping and brought to its knees by COVID-19 pandemic is the undisputable proposition. In the grey zone at the global level, in the absence of a definitive prognosis on the decline and rise of American and Chinese power respectively. What happened in COVID-19? The world was unaware. Many economies faced the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis, decline and rise of American. So the American power declined and the Chinese power increased or rose. The two heavyweights, USA and China, are jabbing at one another without any one of them being able to deliver the decisive knockout blow. So we are seeing USA had reduced and China increased. Both are fighting against each other without any decisive knockout blow. And this is the point where the middle level countries can now try to come forward and grow. The contest promises to be a long drawn one that could last decades and result in several bouts across domains ranging from traditional military and diplomatic spaces to new frontiers such as space, cyber, and cognitive domain. As the two powers engage in a strategy of exhaustion, middle powers such as India must see an opportunity to redefine their place in the world order. So, as I had just told you, USA and China are fighting. They are big powers. China has risen, USA is on a decline. At this time, middle powers such as India should see them as an see the situation as an opportunity. Let's see what are the chances for middle powers. Alexander L. George, a pioneering American political scientist, is best known for his work on coercive diplomacy. So let's see what is the coercive diplomacy. It is instructive to benchmark the happenings in eastern Ladakh against four of his variants of coercive diplomacy. So he talks about coercive diplomacy. There are four things: gradual turning of the screw, try and see, tacit ultimatum, and full fledged ultimatum. So, in the Ladakh area, this is what Chinese have been trying to do. First, they gave a gradual turning of the screw by attacking. Try and see this. So, they are trying and seeing. They are not given a complete call for war. Tacit ultimatum means indirectly. and a full-fledged ultimatum. So till the tacit ultimatum part, China has done, not given a full-fledged ultimatum. Through May 2020, that sought to alter the existing status quo in eastern Ladakh. It did so in a progressive manner. So turning of the screw. This is called turning of the screw. What did they do? They came in eastern Ladakh so that they can change the status quo that much resembled the graduated turning of the screw, and then waiting to see India's response and then try and see. This was critical for the Chinese to decide whether it could replicate similar transgressions elsewhere along the line of actual control. So what did they do? They turned the screw and then they waited and they were seeing, try and see, so that they can do the same thing in the other parts of the border. Let's see what happened. In this phase of the crisis, India sought to engage in the mild forms of coercion that involved the building up of forces. So India did not go for a complete fight. India also started building up their forces across the border. The Air Force was brought in. It was also first time ever that the Indian Air Force could display its capabilities in Ladakh in all its roles, giving an indication that a serious demand was being made by India from the People's Liberation Army to restore status quo without an explicit threat or a time laid down by India. So India wanted to show that it is much more stronger. It wanted to be assertive. It wanted to stand in front of the army and face it eye to eye. And it also brought its Indian Air Force. Interestingly, as India's defensive posture was strengthened militarily, so did coercive contain its diplomacy. And then it didn't stop there. In its diplomacy and economic posturing, also by banning the various apps and speaking about China in the various arena without taking China's name, it has been very powerful. And speaking to the Western countries, having failed to coerce the People's Liberation Army to withdraw by mid July, India had two options as per the escalatory ladder laid out by Alexander George. All this posturing by India, did it pay any dividend or does it give any result? Answer is no. But now India had two another options: issue an indirect or final ultimatum for a war that would involve implicit and tightly controlled tactical action, thereby uh, demonstrating resolve and intent, indirect or tacit. Secondly, or give it a full fledged ultimatum. So, one is the indirect one is direct. Direct one would have been a disaster. What did India play a role of, or which one did India choose? If avoidance of war and winning without fight lies at the heart of both Kautilya and Sun Tzu's approach towards statecraft, the PLA's, People Liberation Army's initial moves and deliberate Indian response confirmed to a predictable journey up the escalation ladder that stopped at the tacit ultimatum. So, what India did is it went for the tacit ultimatum, indirect ultimatum. It did not opt for war, but it gave a strong response, which the Chinese did not expect. And the Chinese stopped where they are. So, what was the motive was to get in more, but they could not. So, we have been able to stop them. You can't call it as a win or a loss, but we have been able to prove ourselves that we have stopped them. Equally applicable to the Eastern Ladakh crisis from Alexander George's repository of ideas are the psychological variables that impact the effectiveness of coercion, particularly the dangers of misperceptions and miscalculations under the stressful conditions of crisis. So, another thing that Alexander George talks about is the psychological variations. There can be misperceptions, miscalculations. Ringing true is also his emphasis on the importance of political leaders having good understanding of adversary leaders. So, a good thing about Indian political leaders are they are having good understanding of the enemy leaders, their mindsets and domestic constraints. So, we have also been able to tackle them psychologically, and our leaders know the enemy leaders and mindsets and constraints. Synergy in handling China. So we saw what is happening in China. We saw why the Chinese are doing it. Alexander's George Alexander's theory of the screw and wait and see and indirect ultimatum and final ultimatum. What has how has India responded? Let's see synergy in another positive point. In eastern Ladakh, however, the operational and strategic level, the Chinese engaged in significant overreach and did not expect the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force to mobilize in strength and their operational roles at high altitude with ease. So we have to give it to the Indian Army and the Air Force or the military who have done exceptionally well by standing up against China for facing them, and also the coordination between Indian Army as well as the Air Force in such high altitudes with the Chinese thought that Indians will not be able to do it. The comfort levels of Indian Army with absorbing attrition and offering an impactful riposte like one it did by occupying key heights overlooking People's Liberation Army positions. So another important thing was with comfort Indian Army increased the war without going for the final ultimatum and even occupied key positions which was important for the People's Liberation Army. Makes wonder whether the People's Liberation Army has lost the psychological high ground it gained in May. So they have not lost the battle, no one has won or lost the battle, but this is a psychological warfare. Have they lost the psychological warfare because their game was to catch all these areas which the Indian Army could not allow? On the other hand, Indian Army took those areas which were overlooking People's Liberation Army positions. At the strategic level, the refusal of India's political establishment to push the panic button in May and synergized politico diplomatic military approach by the Indians during negotiations have been welcome departure. So, three things important. First is the Indian Army and the Air Force were able to take key positions and did not back down. Second is the political establishment also did not push the panic button, and they were also able to counter China politically, diplomatically, militarily. In the diplomatic and military realms, India is a status quoist power. So, India actually in the diplomatic and the military realms, the Indians are or India is status quoist. Status quoist means it wants the same situation which it was earlier. Though we might say that Pakistan occupied Kashmir or the Chinese areas which of the Indian areas of the Aksai Chin which are under China, we will say that it is ours, but we have never gone militarily to take those areas back. So we are more of a status quo power, but the China is a revisionist power. This implies the history is testimony to the possibility that when faced with adversaries who are either irrational or revisionist, there is every likelihood of India initially being rocked onto the back foot during a crisis that involves either the application or the show of force. Response strategies to such situations are where there is much ground still to be covered. So, India, remember, is diplomatically and militarily a status quo power. We are not associated with coercion. We are we are more considered to be a status quoist, and China is more considered to be a revisionist. So this implies an history's testimony that whenever these adversaries attack India, there is likelihood of India initially being rocked back into the back foot, but later India is known for bouncing back. Response strategies to such situations are where there is much ground still to be covered. So, in conclusion, India has militarily recovered well, diplomatically played hardball, and strategically posted deftly, despite the constraints of ongoing pandemic. So, we had to face the rising China, plus we had to also face the pandemic. While it is too early to predict the trajectory of events when the snow melts, the Chinese have bitten more off than they can chew and could be looking for a face saving solution. So, still, we do not know where the whole situation will be. Chinese are still on some of the areas which were considered to be a disputed area. India also has taken some key points. When such a possibility emerges with the kind of power asymmetry, we know how China is very huge and very powerful, very aggressive. India was not considered so much, but we stood, and that is how it shows what we are made of. And India has been considered to be more successful. That exists between the two countries. It can only be fair to argue that India has done well in countering Chinese coercion in Ladakh with its own brand of counter coercion. So, this is all for China India relations, which is happening in the current affairs. Remember, the art and science of asking questions is the source of all knowledge. Thank you.